A man named Wolfton Fitzgerald settled in this village as a farrier. His antecedent did not transfer, and he had no family. He lived by himself, was very careless of his person, and when in his cups, as he often was, regarded the honor neither of God nor man in his conversation. Indeed, if it were not speaking ill of the death, one might say that he was a dirty drunken, blasphemous blackguard. Worse again, he was, I fear, an atheist, for he never attended Mass and gave His Holiness verse and language even then he gave the cue. I should have mentioned that he was a bitter rebel and boasted that his grandfather had been out in '98 and his father with Smith O'Brien. At last, he went by the name of Brimstone Billy and was held up in the village as a type of old wickedness. You are aware that our graveyard, situated on the north side of the water, is famous throughout the country as the burial place of the nuns of St. Ursula, the hermit of 4 Mile Water, and many other holy people. No Protestant has never ventured to enforce this legal right of interment there, though to have died in the parish within my own recollection. 3 weeks ago, this Fitzgerald died in a fit thrown on by drink, and a great hullabaloo was raised in the village when it became known that he could be buried in the graveyard. The body had been wrecked to prevent its being stolen and buried at the crossroads. Why people were greatly disappointed when they were told I could do nothing to stop the burial, particularly as I, of course, refused to read any service on the occasion. However, I bade them not interfere, and the interment was effected on the 14th of July last in the evening, and long after the legal hour there was no disturbances. Next morning, the graveyard was found moved to the south side of the water, with the one newly filled grave left behind on the north side, and thus they both remain. The departed saints would not lie with the reprobate. I can testify to it on the oath of a Christian priest, and if this will not satisfy those without outside the church, anyone, as I said before, who remembers where the graveyard was 2 months ago can confirm me. I respectfully suggested that a thorough investigation into the truth of this miracle be proposed to committee of Protestant gentlemen. They shall not be asked to accept a single fact of hearsay from my people. The ordnance maps show where the graveyard was, and anyone can see for himself where it is. I need not tell your eminence what I rebuke this would be to those enemies of the Holy Church that had sought to put a stain on her by discrediting the late wonderful manifestation of Knock Chapel. If they come to 4 Mile Water, they need cross-examine no one. They will be asked to believe nothing but their own senses. Awaiting your eminence counsel to guide me further in the matter, I am etc. Well, Seno, said my uncle, what do you think of Father Hickey now? Uncle, do not ask me. Beneath this roof, I desire to believe everything. The Reverend Hickey has appealed strongly to my love of legend. Let us admire the poetry of his narrative and ignore the balance of probability between a Christian priest telling a lie on his oath and a graveyard swimming across a river in the middle of the night and forgetting to return. Tom Hickey is not telling a lie, sir. You may take my word for that, but he may be mistaken. Such a mistake amounts to insanity. It is true that I myself, awaking suddenly in the depth of night, have found myself convinced that the position of my bed had been reversed, but on opening my eyes the illusion ceased. I fear Mr. Hickey is mad. Your best course is this. Send down to 4 Mile Water a perfectly sane investigator, an acute observer, one whose perceptive faculty at once healthy and subtle are absolutely unclouded by religious prejudice. In a word, send me. I will report to you the true state of affairs in a few days, and you can then make agreements for transferring Hickey from the altar to the asylum. Yes, I had intended to send you. You are wonderfully sharp, and you would make a capital detective if you could only keep your mind to one point. But your chief qualification for this business is that you are too crazy to excite the suspicion of those whom you have to watch. For the affair may be trick. If so, I hope and believe that Hickey has no hand in it. Still, it is my duty to take every precaution. Cardinal, may I ask whether traces of insanity have ever appeared in our family? Except in you and in my grandmother, no. She was a Pole, and you resemble her personally. Why do you ask? Because it has often occurred to me that you are perhaps a little cracked. Excuse my candor, but a man who was devoted his life to the pursuit of a red hat, who accuses everyone else beside himself of being mad, and who is disposed to listen seriously to a tale of peripatetic graveyard, can hardly be quite sane. Depend upon it, uncle, you want rest and change. The blood of your Polish grandmother is in your veins. I hope I may not be committing a sin in sending a ribald on a church affairs, he replied fervently. However, we must use the instrument put into our hands. Is it agreed that you go? Had you not delayed me with the story, which I might as well have learned to the spot? I have been there already. There is no occasion for impatience, I must first send to Hickey to find a place for you. I shall tell him that you are going to recover your health, as in fact you are, and in heaven's name, be discreet. Try to act like a man of sense. Do not dispute with Hickey on matters of religion, since you are my nephew. When I had supped at a restaurant, I returned to my hotel and tried to read. In vain. The sound of feet in the corridors, as the other occupants of the hotel went to bed distracted by attention from my book. Suddenly it occurred to me that I had never quite understood my uncle's character. He, father of a great flock of poor and ignorant Irish, an austere and saintly man, to whom livers of hopeless lives daily appealed for help heavenward, who was reputed never to have sent away a troubled peasant without revealing him of his burden by sharing it, whose knees were worn less by the altar steps than by the tears and embraces of the guilty and brucked. He had refused to humor my light extravagances, or to find time to talk with me of books, flowers, and music. Had I not been mad to expect it? Now that I needed sympathy myself, I did him justice. I desired to be with a true-hearted man and to mingle my tears with his. I looked at my watch. It was nearly an hour past midnight. In the corridor, the lights were out, except one jet at the end. I threw a cloak upon my shoulders. Put on a Spanish hat, and left my apartment, listening to the echoes of my measured steps retreating through the deserted passages. A strange sight arrested me on the landing of the grand staircase. Through an open door, I saw the moonlight shining through the windows of the saloon in which some entertainment had recently taken place. I looked at my watch again. It was but 1 o'clock, and yet the guests had departed. I entered the room, my boots ringing loudly on the waxed boards. On a chair lay a child's cloak and a broken toy. The entertainment had been a children's party. I stood for a time looking at the shadow of my cloaked figure upon the floor and at the disordered decorations, ghostly in the white light. Then I saw that there was a grand piano still open in the middle of the room. My fingers throbbed as I sat down before it and expressed all that I felt in a grand hymen which seemed to thrill the cold stillness of the shadow into a deep hum of approbation, and to people the radiance of the moon with angels. Soon there was a stir without too, as if the rapture were spreading abroad. It took up the chant triumphantly with my voice, and the empty saloon resounded as though to the thunder of an orchestra. Hello, sir. Confound you, sir. Do you suppose that is what the deuce? I turned, and silence followed. 6 men, partially dressed and with disheveled hair, stood regarding me angrily. They all carried candles. One of them had a bootjack, which he held like a truncheon. Another, the foremost, had a pistol. The night porter was behind, trembling. Sir, said the man with the revolver, coarsely, may I ask whether you are mad, that you disturb people at this hour with such an unearthly noise? Is it possible that you dislike it? I replied courteously. Dislike it, said he, stamped with rage. Why, damn everything. Do you suppose we were enjoying it? Take care, he is mad, whispered the man with the bootjack. I began to laugh. Eventually, they did think me mad, unaccustomed to my habit and ignorant of music, as they probably were. The mistake, however absurd, was not unnatural. I rose. They came close to one another, and the night porter ran away. Gentlemen, I said, I am sorry for you. Had you lain still and listened, we should all have been the better and happier. But what you have done, you cannot undo. Kindly inform the night porter that I am going to visit my uncle, the Cardinal Archbishop. Adieu. I strode past them and left them whispering among themselves. Some minute later, I knocked at the door of the cathedral's house. Presently, a window on the first floor was opened, and the moonbeam fell on a grey head with a black cap that seemed ashy pale against the unfathomable gloom of the shadow beneath the stone sill. Who are you? I am Sino Leggi. What do you want at these hours? The question wondered me. My dear uncle, I exclaimed, I know you do not intend it, but you make me feel unwelcome. Come down and let me in, I beg. Go to your hotel, he said sternly. I will see you in the morning. Good night. He disappeared and closed the window. I felt that if I let this rebuff pass, I should not feel kindly toward my uncle in the morning, nor indeed at any future time. I therefore plied the knocker with my right hand and kept the bell ringing with my left until I heard the door chain rattle within. The cardinal's expression was grave nearly to moroseness as he confronted me on the threshold. Uncle, I cried, grasping his hand, do not reproach me. Your door is never shut against the wrecked. I am wrecked. Let us sit upon night and talk. You may thank my position and not my charity for your admission. Seno, he said, for the sake of the neighbors, I had rather you played the fool in my study than upon my doorstep at this hour. Walk upstairs quietly, if you please. My housekeeper is a hard-working woman. The little sleep she allowed herself must not be disturbed. You have a noble heart, uncle. I shall creep like a mouse. This is my study, he said, as we entered an ill-furnished den on the second floor. The only refreshment I can offer you, if you desire any, is a bunch of raisins. The doctors have forbidden you to touch stimulants, I believe. By heaven, he raised his finger. Pardon me, I was wrong to swear, but I had totally forgotten the doctors. At dinner I had a bottle of grapes. You have no business to be travelling alone. Your mother promised me that Bushy should come over here with you. For Bushy is not a man of feeling. Besides, he is a coward. He refused to come with me because I purchased a revolver. He should have been taken the revolver from you and kept to his post. Why will you persist in treating me like a child, uncle? I am very impassionable, I grant you, but I have gone round the world alone and do not need to be dry-nursed through a tour in Ireland. What do you intend to do during your stay here? I had no plan and intended of answering. I shrugged my shoulders and looked around the apartment. There was a statue of Virgin upon my uncle's desk. I looked at its face as he was wont to look in the midst of his labors. I saw the eternal peace. The air became luminous with an infinite network of the jeweled rings of paradise descending in roseate cloud upon us. Uncle, I said, bursting into the sweetest tears I had ever shed, my wanderings are over. I will enter the church, if you will help me. Let us read together the third part of Faust, for I understand it at last. Hush, man, he said, half raising with an expression of alarm. Control yourself. Do not let my tears mislead you. I am calm and strong. Quick, let us have Gothe. But I have in my portmanteau at the hotel. I said, raising, let me go for it. I will return in 15 minutes. The devil in you, I believe, cannot. I interrupted him with a shout of laughter. Cardinal, I said noisily, you have become profane, and a profane priest is always the best of good followers. Let us have some wine, and I will sing you a German beer song. Heaven forgive me if I do you wrong, he said, but I believe God had laid the expiation of some sin on your unhappy head. Will you favor me with your attention for a while? I have something to say to you, and I have also to get some sleep before my hour for racing, which is 5:30, my usual hour for retiring, when I retire at all. But proceed, my fault is not inattention, but over susceptibility. Well, then I want you to go to Wicklow. My reasons, no matter what they may be, said I, raising again. It is enough that you desire me to go. I shall start forthwith. Zeno, will you sit down and listen to me? I sank upon my chair reluctantly. Ardor in a crime in your eyes, even when it is shown in your service, I said. May I turn down the light? Why? To bring on my sombre mood, which I am able to listen with tireless patience. I will turn it down myself. Will that do? I thanked him and composed myself to listen. In the shadow, my eyes, I felt glittered. I was like poet's raven. Now for my reasons for sending you to Wicklow. First, for your own sake. If you stay in town or in any place where excitement can be obtained by any means, you will be in Swift's hospital in a week. You must live in the country under the eyes of one upon who can depend. And you must have something to do to keep you out of mischief and away from your music and painting and poetry, which Sir John Richard writes to me, are dangerous for you in your present morbid state. Second, because I can entrust you with a task in which hands of sensible men might bring discredit on the church. In short, I want you to investigate a miracle. He looked attentively at me. I sat like a statue. You understand me? He said. Nevermore, I replied hoarsely. Pardon me, I added, assumed at the trick my imagination had played me. I understand you perfectly. Proceed. I hope you do. Well, 4 miles distant from the town of Wicklow is a village called 4 Mile Water. The resident priest is Father Hickey. Have heard of the miracles at Knock? I winked. I did not ask you what you think of them, but whether you have heard of them. I see you have. I need not tell you that even a miracle may do more harm than good to the church in this country, unless it can be proved so thoroughly that her powerful and jealous enemies are silenced by the testimony of followers of their poesy. Therefore, when I saw in a Waxford newspaper last week a description of a strange manifestation of the divine power, which was said to have taken place at 4 Mile Water, I was troubled in my mind about it, so I wrote to Father Hickey, bidding him give me an account of the matter, if it were true, and if not, to denounce from the altar the author of the report, and to contradict it in the paper at once. This is his reply. He says, well, the first part is about church matters. I need not trouble you with it. He goes on to say, one moment. In this his own handwriting, it does not look like a man's. He suffers from rheumatism in the fingers of his right hand, and his niece, who is an orphan, who lives with him, acts as his amanuensis. Well, stay, what is her name? Her name, Kate Hickey. How old is she? Tush, man, she is only a little girl. If she were old enough to concern you, I should not send you into her way. Have you any more questions to ask about her? None. I can fancy her in a white veil at the rite of confirmation, a type of faith and innocence. Enough of her. What says the Reverend Hickey of the apparitions? They are not apparition. I will read you what he says. In reply to you, Edgar, concerning the last miraculous event in his parish, I have to inform you that I can vouch for its truth, and that I can be confirmed not only by the inhabitants of the place, who are all Catholics, but by every person acquainted with the former situation of the graveyard referred to, including the Protestant Archdeacon of Baltinglass, who spent 6 weeks annually in the neighborhood. The newspaper account is incomplete and inaccurate. The following are the facts. About 4 years ago, a man named Wolfton Fitzgerald settled in this village as a farrier. His antecedent did not transpire, and he had no family. He lived by himself, was very careless of his person, and when in his cups, as he often was, regarded the honor neither of God nor man in his conversation. Indeed, if it were not speaking ill of the dead, one might say that he was a dirty drunken, blasphemous blackguard. Worse again, he was, I fear, an atheist, for he never attended Mass and gave His Holiness verse and language. Even then he gave the cue. I should have mentioned that he was a bitter rebel and boasted that his grandfather had been out in '98 and his father with Smith O'Brien. At last he went by the name of Brimstone Billy and was held up in the village as a type of all wickedness. You are aware that our graveyard, situated on the north side of the water, is famous throughout the country as the burial place of the nuns of St. Ursula, the hermit of 4 Mile Water, and many other holy people. No Protestant has never ventured to enforce this legal right of interment there, though to have died in the parish within my own recollection. 3 weeks ago, this Fitzgerald died in a fit thrown on by drink, and a great hullabaloo was raised in the village when it became known that he could be buried in the graveyard. The body had been wrecked to prevent its being stolen and buried at the crossroads. Why people were greatly disappointed when they were told I could do nothing to stop the burial, particularly as I, of course, refused to read any service on the occasion. However, I bade them not interfere, and the interment was effected on the 14th of July last in the evening, and long after the legal hour there was no disturbances. Next morning, the graveyard was found moved to the south side of the water, with the one newly filled grave left behind on the north side, and thus they both remain. The departed saints would not lie with the reprobate. I can testify to it on the oath of a Christian priest, and if this will not satisfy those without outside the church, anyone, as I said before, who remembers where the graveyard was 2 months ago can confirm me. I respectfully suggested that a thorough investigation into the truth of this miracle be proposed to committee of Protestant gentlemen, They shall not be asked to accept a single fact of hearsay from my people. The ordnance maps show where the graveyard was, and anyone can see for himself where it is. I need not tell your eminence what I rebuke this would be to those enemies of the Holy Church that had sought to put a stain on her by discrediting the late wonderful manifestation of Knock Chapel. If they come to 4 Mile Water, they need cross-examine no one. They will be asked to believe nothing but their own senses. Awaiting your eminence counsel to guide me further in the matter, I am etc. Well, Zeno, said my uncle, what do you think of Father Hickey now? Uncle, do not ask me. Beneath this roof, I desire to believe everything. The Reverend Hickey has appealed strongly to my love of legend. Let us admire the poetry of his narrative and ignore the balance of probability between a Christian priest telling a lie on his oath and a graveyard swimming across a river in the middle of the night and forgetting to return. Tom Hickey is not telling a lie, sir. You may take my word for that, but he may be mistaken. Such a mistake amounts to insanity. It is true that I myself, awaking suddenly in the depth of night, have found myself convinced that the position of my bed had been reversed, but on opening my eyes, the illusion ceased. I fear Mr. Hickey is mad. Your best course is this. Send down to 4 Mile Water a perfectly sane investigator, an acute observer, one whose perceptive faculty at once healthy and subtle are absolutely unclouded by religious prejudice. In a word, send me. I will report to you the true state of affairs in a few days, and you can then make agreements for transferring Hickey from the altar to the asylum. Yes, I had intended to send you. You are wonderfully sharp, and you would make a capital detective if you could only keep your mind to one point. But your chief qualification for this business is that you are too crazy to excite the suspicion of those whom you have to watch. For the affair may be trick. If so, I hope and believe that Hickey has no hand in it. Still, it is my duty to take every precaution. Cardinal, may I ask whether traces of insanity have ever appeared in our family? Except in you and in my grandmother, no. She was a Pole, and you resemble her personally. Why do you ask? Because it has often occurred to me that you are perhaps a little cracked. Excuse my candor, but a man who was devoted his life to the pursuit of a red hat, who accuses everyone else beside himself of being mad, and who is disposed to listen seriously to a tale of peripatetic graveyard, can hardly be quite sane. Depend upon it, uncle, you want rest and change. The blood of your Polish grandmother is in your veins. I hope I may not be committing a sin in sending a ribald on a church affairs, he replied fervently. However, we must use the instrument put into our hands. Is it agreed that you go? Had you not delayed me with the story, which I might as well have learned to the spot? I have been there already. There is no occasion for Impatient, Zeno. I must first send to Hickey to find a place for you. I shall tell him that you are going to recover your health, as in fact you are, and Zeno, in heaven's name, be discreet. Try to act like a man of sense. Do not dispute with Hickey on matters of religion. Since you are my nephew, you had better not disgrace me. I shall become an ardent Catholic and do you infinite credit, uncle. I wish you would, although you would hardly be an acquisition to the church. And now I must turn you out. It is nearly 3 o'clock and I need some sleep. Do you know your way back to your hotel? I need not stir. I can sleep in this chair. Go to bed and never mind me. I shall not close my eyes until you are safely out of the house. Come, rouse yourself and say good night. The following is a copy of my first report to the Cardinal. 4 Mile Water, Country, Wicklow, 10th August. My dear uncle, the miracle is genuine. I have affected perfect credulity in order to throw the Hickey and the country folk off their guard with me. I have listened to their method of convincing skeptical strangers. I have examined the ordnance maps and cross-examined the neighboring Protestant gentlefolk. I have spent a day upon the ground on each side of the water and have visited it at midnight. I have considered the upheaval theories, subsidized theories, volcanic theories, and tidal wave theories which the provincial savant have suggested. They are all untenable. There is only one scoffer in the district, an orgman, and he admit the removal of the cemetery, but say it was dug up and transplanted in the night by a body of men under the command of Father Tom. This also is out of the question. The interment of Brimstone Willie was the first which had taken place for 4 years, and his is the only grave in bears a trace of recent digging. It is along on the north bank, and the inhabitant shun it after nightfall. As each passerby during the day throw a stone upon it, it will soon be marked by a large cairn. The graveyard with a ruined stone chapel still standing in its midst is on the south side. You may send down a committee to investigate the matter as soon as you please. There can be no doubt as to the miracle having actually taken place as recorded by Hickey. As for me, I have grown so accustomed to it that if the country Wicklow were to waltz off with me to Middlesex, I should be quite impatient of any expressions of surprise from my friend in London. Is not the above the business-like statement? Away then with this stale miracle. If you would see for yourself a miracle which can never pall, a vision of youth and health to be crowded with garland forever, come down and see Katie Hickey, whom you suppose to be a little girl. Illusion, my Lord Cardinal, illusion. She is 17, with a bloom and a brock that would lay your asceticism in ashes at a flash. To her, I am an object of wonder, a strange man bred in wicked cities. She is coated by 6 feet of harming material, chopped off a spare length of coarse humanity by the Almighty, and flung into Wicklow to plough the fields. His name is Phil Langan, and he hates me. I have to consort with him for the sake of Father Tom, whom I entertain vastly by stories of your wild oats sown at Salamanca. I exhausted all my authentic anecdotes the first day, and now I invent gallant escaped with Spanish donas, in which you figure as a youth of unstable morals. This delight of Father Tom infinitely. I feel that I have done you a service by thus casting on the cold sacerdotal abstraction which formerly represented you in Kate's imagination, a ray of vivifying passion. What a country is this, a Hesperidian garden, such skies. Adieu, uncle. Sino legi. Behold me. Then at 4 Mile Water, in love. I had been in love frequently, but not oftener than once a year had I encountered a woman who affected me as seriously as Kate Hickey. She was so shrewd and yet so flippant. When I spoke of art, she yawned. When I deplored the sordidness of the world, she laughed and called me poor fellow. When I told her what a treasure of beauty and freshness she ridiculed me. When I reproached her with her brutality, she became angry and sneered at me for being what she called a fine gentleman. One sunny afternoon, we were standing at the gate of her uncle's house, she looking down the dusty road for the detectable Langan, I watching the spotless azure sky, when she said, "How soon are you going back to London?" "I am not going back to London, Miss Hickey. I am not yet tired of 4 Mile Water. I am sure 4 Mile Water ought to be proud of your approbation. You disapprove of my liking it then, or is it that you grudge me the happiness I have found there? I think Irish ladies grudge a man moment's peace. I wonder you have ever prevailed on yourself to associate with Irish ladies, since they are so far beneath you." "Did I so? They were beneath me, Miss Hickey. I feel that I have made a deep impression on you." "Indeed, yes, you are quite right. I assure you I cannot sleep at night for thinking of you, Mr. Legge. It is the best a Christian can do, seeing you think so mighty little of yourself. You are triply wrong, Miss Hickey. Wrong to be sarcastic with me, wrong to pretend that there is anything unreasonable in my belief that you think of me sometimes, and wrong to discourage the candor with which I always avow that think constantly of myself. Then you had better not speak to me, since I have no manners." Again, did I say you had no manners? The warmest expression of regard from my mouth seemed to reach your ears, transformed into insults. Were I to repeat the litany of the Blessed Virgin, you would report as though I had been approaching you. This is because you hate me. You never misunderstand Langan, whom you love. I don't know what Langdon manners are, Mr. Legge, but in Ireland, gentlemen are expected to mind their own business. How dare you say, I love Mr. Langan, then you do not love him? It is nothing to you whether I love him or not, nothing to me that you hate me and love another. I didn't say I hated you. You are not so very clever yourself at understanding what people say, though you make such a fuss because they don't understand you. Here, as she gazed down the road again, she suddenly looked glad. "Ah," I said, "what do you mean by ah?" "No matter. I will now show you what a man's sympathy is. As you perceived just then, Langan, who is too tall for his age, by the by, is coming to pay you a visit. Well, instead of staying with you, as a jealous woman would, I will withdraw. I don't care whether you go or stay. I am sure. I wonder what you would give to be as fine a man as Mr. Langan. All I possess, I swear it, but solely because you admire tall men more than broad views. Mr. Langan may be defined geometrically as length without breadth, altitude without position, a line on the landscape, not a point in it. How very clever you are. You do not understand me. I see. Here comes your lover, stepping over the wall like a camel, and here go I, out through the gate like a Christian. Good afternoon, Mr. Langan. I am going because Miss Heckley has something to say to you about me, which she would rather not say in my presence. You will excuse me. Oh, I will excuse you, said he boorishly. I smiled and went out before I was quite out of hearing. Katie whispered vehemently to him, I hate that fellow. I smiled again, but I had scarcely done so why my spirit fell. I walked hastily away with a coarse, threatening sound in my ear like that of the clarinets whose sustained low notes darkened the woodland in der ferrets. I found myself presently at the graveyard. It was a barren place, enclosed by a mud wall, with a gate to admit funerals, and numerous gaps to admit the peasantry, who made shortcut across it as they went to and fro between 4 Mile Water and the market town. The graves were mounds overgrown with grass. There was no keeper, nor were there flowers, railings, or any of the conventionalities that make an English graveyard repulsive. A great thorn bush near what was called the grave of the Holy Sisters was covered with scraps of cloth and flannel, attached by peasant women who had prayed before it. There are 3 kneeling there as I entered, for the reputation of the place had been revived of late by the miracle, and a ferry had been established close by to conduct visitors over the route taken by the graveyard. From where I stood, I could see on the opposite bank a heap of stones, perceptibly increased since my last visit, marking the deserted grave of Brimstone Willie. Thus strained my eyes broodingly at it for some minute, and then descended the river bank and entered the boat. Good evening, Your Honor, said the ferryman, and set to work to draw the boat hand over hand by a rope stretched across the water. Good evening. Is your business beginning to fall off yet? Faith, it never was as good as it might been. The people that come from the south side can be Billy's grave, Lord have mercy on him, across the weather, and they think bad of paying a penny to put a stone over him. It is them that lives towards Dublin. What makes the journey? Your Honor, is the third I have brought from south to north this blessed day. When do most people come? In the afternoon, I suppose. All hours, sir, except after dusk. There isn't a soul in the country come within sight of that grave whilst the sun goes down. And you, do you stay here all night by yourself? The holy heaven forbid. Is it me? Stay here at night? No, Your Honor. I tethered the boat at Chathen-bhagat and leave Brimstone Billy. God forgive him. to take care of it. Morning. It will be stolen some night. I am afraid. Ara. Would dar. Come next or next it. Let alone steal it. Faith. I would think twice before looking at it myself in the dark. God bless your honor and grant long life. I had given him 6 pence. I went to the reprobate's grave and stood at the foot of it, looking at the sky, gorgeous with the descent of the sun. To my English eyes, accustomed to giant trees, broad lawns, and stately mansions, the landscape was wild and inhospitable. The ferryman was already tugging at the rope on his way back. I had told him I did not intend to return that way, and presently I saw him make the painter fast to the south bank. But on this boat, and trudged homeward. I turned toward the grave at my feet. Those who had interred Brimstone Billy, working hastily at an unlawful hour and in fear of molestation by the people, had hardly dug a grave. They had scooped out earth enough to hide their burden, and no more. A stray goat had kicked away a corner of the mound and exposed the coffin. It occurred to me, as I took some of stone from the cairn and heaved them so as to repair the breach, that had the miracle been the work of a body of men, they would have moved the one grave instead of the many. Even from a supernatural point of view, it seemed strange that the sinner should have banished the elect, when by their superior numbers they might so much more easily have banished him. It was almost dark when I left the spot. After a walk of half a mile, I recrossed the water by a bridge and returned to the farmhouse in which I lodged. Here, finding that I had had enough of solitude, I only stayed to take a cup of tea. Then I went to Father Heckie's cottage. Katie was alone. When I entered, she looked up quickly as I opened the door and turned away disappointed when she recognized me. Be generous for once, I said. I have walked about aimlessly for hours in order to avoid spoiling the beautiful afternoon for you by my presence. When the sun was up, I withdrew my shadow from your path. Now that darkness has fallen, shed some light on mine. May I stay half an hour? You may stay as long as you like, of course. My uncle will soon be home. He is clever enough to talk to you. What? More sarcasms? Come, Miss Hickey. Help me to spend a pleasant evening. It will only cost you a smile. I am somewhat cast down. 4 Mile Water is a paradise, but without you it would be a little lonely. It must be very lonely for you. I wonder why you came here. Because I heard that the women here were all surliness like you, and the men macetos like Mr. Phil. Where are you going to? Let me pass, Mr. Leggy. I had intended never speaking to you again after the way you went on about Mr. Langan today, and I wouldn't either. Only my uncle made me promise not to take any notice of you, because you were no matter. But I won't listen to you any more on the subject. Do not go. I swear never to mention his name again. I beg your pardon for what I said. You shall have no further cause for complaint. Will you forgive me? She sat down, evidently disappointed by my submission. I took a chair and placed myself near her. She tapped the floor impatiently with her foot. I saw that there was not a movement I could make, not a look, not a tone of my voice, which did not irritate her. You were remarking, I said, that your uncle desired you to take no notice of me because. She closed her lips and did not answer. I fear I have offended you again by my curiosity, but indeed I had no idea that he had forbidden you to tell me the reason. He did not forbid me, since you are so determined to find out. No, excuse me, I do not wish to know. I am sorry I asked. Indeed, perhaps you would be sorrier still to be told. I only made a secret of it out of consideration for you. Then your uncle has spoken ill of me behind my back. If that be so, there is such a thing as a true man in Ireland. I would not have believed it on the word of any woman alive save yourself. I never said my uncle was a backbiter. Just to show you what he thinks of you, I will tell you, whether you want to know it or not, that he bid me not mind you because you were only a poor mad creature, sent down here by your family to be out of harm's way. Oh, Miss Hickey, there now, you have got it out of me, and I wish I had bit my tongue out first. I sometimes think that I marine sin, that you have a bad angel in you. I am glad you told me this, I said gently. Do not reproach yourself for having done so, I beg. Your uncle has been misled by what he had heard of my family, who are all more or less insane. Far from being mad, I am actually the only rational man named Leggy in the three kingdoms. I will prove this to you, and at the same time keep your indiscretion in the countenance by telling you something I ought not to tell you. It is this: I am not here as an invalid or a chance tourist. I am here to investigate the miracle, the cardinal, the shroud. If somewhat erratic man selected mine from all the long had at his disposal to come down here and find out the truth of Father Hickey's story. Would he have entrusted such a task to a madman? Think you? The truth of who dared to doubt my uncle's word? And so you are a spy, a dirty informer? I stared and started. The adjective she had used, though probably the commonest expression of the contempt in Ireland, is revolting to an Englishman. Miss Hickey, I said, there is in me, as you have said, a bad angel. Do not shock my good angel, who is a person of taste, quite away from my heart, lest the other be left undisputed monarch of it. Hark, the chapel bell is ringing, the Angelus. Can you, with that sound softening the darkness of the village night, cherish a feeling of spite against one who admires you? You come between me and my prayers, she said hysterically, and began to sob. She had scarcely done so when I heard a voice without. Then Langan and the priest entered. Oh, Phil, she cried, running to him, take me away from him. I can't bear. I turned toward him and showed him my dog-tooth in a false smile. He felled me at one stroke, as he might have felled a poplar tree. Murder? Exclaimed the priest. What are you doing, Phil? He is an informer, sobbed Katie. He came down here to spy on you, uncle, and to try to show that the blessed miracle was a make-up. I know it long before he told me. By his insulting way, he wanted to make love to me. I rose with difficulty from beneath the table where I had lain, motionless for a moment. Sir, I said, I am somewhat dashed by the recent action of Mr. Langan, whom I beg the next time he converts himself into fulling mills to do so at the expense of a man more nearly his equal in strength than I. What your niece has told you is partly true. I am indeed the Cardinal's spy, and I have already reported to him that the miracle is a genuine one. A committee of gentlemen will wait on you tomorrow to verify it at my suggestion. I have thought that the proof might be regarded by them as more complete if you were taken by surprise, Miss Hickey. That I admire all that is admirable in you is but to say that I have a sense of the beautiful. To say that I love you would be mere profanity. Mr. Langan, I have in my pocket a loaded pistol, which I carry from a silly English prejudice against your countrymen. Had I been the Hercules of the Clocktail, and you in my place, I should have been a dead man now. Do not redden. You are safe as far as I am concerned. Let me tell you before you leave my house for good, said Father Hickey, who seemed to have become unreasonably angry, that you should never have crossed my threshold. If I had known you were a spy, no, not if your uncle were His Holiness the Pope himself. Here a frightful thing happened to me. I felt giddy and put my hand to my head. 3 warm drops trickled over it. Instantly I became murderous. My mouth filled with blood. My eyes were blinded with it. I seemed to drown in it. My hand went involuntarily to the pistol. It was my habit to obey my impulses instantaneously. Fortunately, the impulse to kill vanished before a sudden perception of how I might miraculously humble the mad vanity in which these foolish people had turned upon me. The blood receded from my ears, and I again heard and saw distinctly. And let me tell you, Langan was saying that if you think yourself handier with cold lead than you are with your fists, I will exchange shots with you and welcome whenever you please. Father Tom's credit is the same to me as my own, and if you say a word against it, you lie. His credit is in my hands. I said, I am the Cardinal's witness. Do you defy me? There is the door, said the priest, holding it open before me. Until you can undo the visible work of God's hand, your testimony can do no harm to me. Father Hickey, I replied, before the sun rises again upon 4-mile water, I will undo the visible work of God's hand and bring the pointing finger of the scoffer upon your altar. I bowed to Katie and walked out. It was so dark that I could not first see the garden gate. Before I found it, I heard through the window Father Hickey's voice saying, I wouldn't for 10 pound that this had happened, Phil. He is a mad as a march here. The cardinal told me so. I returned to my lodging and took a cold bath to cleanse the blood from my neck and shoulder. The effect of the blow I had received was so severe that even after the bath and a light meal I felt giddy and languid. There was an alarm clock. I wound it, set the alarm for 12:30, muffled it so that it should not disturb the people in the adjoining room, and went to bed, where I slept soundly for an hour and a quarter. Then the alarm roused me, and I sprang up before I was thoroughly awake. Had I hesitated, the desire to relapse into perfect sleep would have overpowered me, although the muscles of my neck were painfully stiff and my hands unsteady from my nervous disturbances produced by the interruption of my first slumber. I dressed myself resolutely, and after taking a draught of cold water, stole out of the house. It was exceedingly dark, and I had some difficulty in finding the cowhouse, whence I borrowed a spade and a truck with wheels, ordinarily used for moving sacks of potatoes. These I carried in my hand until I was beyond earshot of the house, when I put the spade on the truck and wheeled it along the road to the cemetery. When I approached the water, knowing that no one would dare to come there about at such an hour, I made greater haste, no longer concerning myself about the rattling of the wheels. Looking across to the opposite bank, I could see a phosphorescent glow, marking the lonely grave of Brimstone Billy. This helped me to find the ferry station, where after wandering a little and trembling over, I found the boat and embarked with my implement. Guided by the rope, I crossed the water without difficulty, landed, made fast the boat, dragged the truck up the bank, and sat down to rest on the cairn at the grave. For nearly a quarter of an hour I sat watching the patches of jack-o'-lantern fire and collecting my strength for the work before me. Then the distant bell of the chapel clock tolled one. I rose, took the spade, and in about 10 minutes uncovered the coffin, which smelt horribly. Keeping to windward of it, and using the spade as a lever, I contrived with great labor to place it on the truck. I wheeled it without accident to the landing place, where by placing the shafts of the truck upon the stern of the boat and lifting the foot by main strength, I succeeded in embarking my load after 20-minute toil, during which I got covered with clay and perspiration, and several times all but upset the boat. At the southern bank, I had less difficulty in getting truck and coffin ashore and dragging them up to the graveyard. It was now past 2 o'clock and the dawn had begun, so that I had no further trouble from want of light. I wheeled the coffin to a patch of loamy soil, which I had noticed in the afternoon near the grave of the Holy Sisters. I had warmed to my work. My neck no longer pained me, and I began to dig vigorously, soon making a hollow trench deep enough to hide the coffin with the addition of a mound. The chill pearl-colored morning had by this time quite dissipated the darkness. I could see and was myself visible for miles around. This alarmed me and made me impatient to finish my task. Nevertheless, I was forced to rest for a moment before placing the coffin in the trench. I wiped my brow and wrists and again looked about me. The tomb of the holy woman, a massive slab supported on 4 stone spears, was grey and wet with dew. Near it was the thorn bush covered with rags, the newest of which were growing gaudy in the radiance which was stretching up from the coast on the east. It was time to finish my work. I seized the truck, laid it alongside the grave, and gradually prized the coffin off with the spade until it rolled over into the trench with a hollow sound like a drunken remonstrance from the sleeper within. The shoveled the earth round and over it, working as fast as possible. In less than a quarter of an hour it was buried. 10 minutes more sufficed to make the mound symmetrical and to clear the traces of my work from the adjacent sward. Then I flung down the spade, threw up my arms, and vented a sigh of relief and triumph. But I recoiled, as so that I was standing on a barren common, covered with furs. No product of man's handiwork was near me except my truck and spade, and the grave of Princeton Billy. Now, as lonely as before, I turned toward the water. On the opposite bank was the cemetery, with the tomb of the holy woman, the thornbush with its rage stirring in the morning breeze, and the broken mud wall. The ruined chapel was there too, not a stone shaken from its crumbling walls, not a sign to show that it and its precinct were less rooted in their place than the eternal hills around. I looked down at the grave with a pang of compassion for the unfortunate wolf Tom Fitzgerald, with whom the blessed would not rest. I was even astonished, though I had worked expressly to this end. But the birds were astir and the cocks crowing. My landlord was an early riser. I put the spade on the truck again and hastened back to the farm, where I replaced them in the cow house. Then I stole into the house and took a clean pair of boots, an overcoat and a silk hat. These, with a change of linen, were sufficient to make my appearance respectable. I went out again, bathed in the 4-mile water, took a last look at the cemetery, and walked to Wicklow, whence I travelled by the first train to Dublin. Some months later, at Cairo, I received a packet of Irish newspapers and a leading article, cut from the Times, on the subject of the miracle. Father Hickey had suffered the meed of his inhospitable conduct. The committee arrived at 4-mile water the day after I left, had found the graveyard exactly where it had formerly stood. Father Hickey, taken by surprise, had attempted to define himself by a confused statement, which led the committee to declare finally that the miracle was a gross imposture. The Times, commenting on this, after adducing a number of examples of priestly craft, remarked, "We are glad to learn that the Reverend Mr. Hickey had been permanently relieved of his duties as the parish priest of 4 Mile Water by his ecclesiastical superior. It is less gratifying to have to record that it had been found possible to obtain 200 signatures to a memorial embodying the absurd defense offered to the committee and expressing unabated confidence in the integrity of Mr. Hickey."